Today, me and Tete are going to be talking about Golden Age Superman versus Batman. This is the second episode in our Golden Age Superman review series, which you can watch the whole series using the playlist in the description. And this idea for this podcast came from watching the Batman 2022 and making a reaction slash video of it, which you can also watch in the description. There are two videos, one that I made myself and one that I made with Tete. So be sure to check both of them out.
Yes, hi there, guys. So, yes, the idea came from this. We were so impressed with 2022's The Batman that we saw how it went back to its original roots of crime fighting, detective work, and it had a very noir sense in dealing with real life criminals instead of outlandish rogues or any other kind of threat, if you will.
General Grodd.
General Grodd. Yes, a big gorilla. Yes. Yes, thank you. A reverse Planet of the Apes. Yes, perfect. Um, but yes, so it was amazing. Hyperrealism, stripped down minimalism. And I thought to myself, this new take on Batman, why, that's just Golden Age Superman, isn't it? And this is what gave
Hmm.
me the idea for the comparison. And for those of you who have grown up on Silver Age stuff and all the different animated stuff, even though there are some really good stuff and there's some really good stories and issues and stuff like that, if you haven't read Golden Age, I really suggest you do and look also to maybe the history behind Superman as well as his creators and what he meant to to the audience that he was presented before. And I think you'll
Mhm.
get a better understanding that he is not just a big blue boy scout but rather um a modern day Samson, a working class champion hero. That's well, champion,
Mhm.
really, not really a hero. I don't think he would ever think of himself as a hero. um but yes, so I wish we could see for Superman what we saw with Batman this year.
Yes, exactly. And to understand why they are so different and why their movies differ so much in quality, let's talk about why Batman didn't change throughout the 20th century while Superman did. So, you're the DC uh, fanatic here, not me. So, can you tell us how did Batman's character change throughout the 20th century? Did he change as much as Superman? Why or why not, do you think?
Well, I would like to say that, so Batman has a pretty simplistic concept. His premise is pretty linear. You basically have a young orphan determined to avenge his parents, take up the persona of a dark and frightening figure, to strike fear into the heart of the criminal underbelly of a corrupt and decaying city. So it's very consistent. I mean, Bruce's personality has always been one of a level headed man, a hard boiled man, um, but at the same time sympathetic to those because he understands how people fall into these things, why people choose a life of crime or, whatever have you. But he's also very tough and relentless. Um, so Batman's premise has been very not really willing to be tampered with. I mean, I think it also helps that even though he premiered a year later after Superman, it sort of helps that he was sort of cast in the mold as kind of a dark noir figure, while Superman, he was technically noir, but he didn't fit the aesthetic or approach of noir. I mean, his outfit was very colorful and bright, and the whole thing of it was the theatrical absurdity of it all was to just kind of like make his enemies think, you know, WTF, like what is that? Like what the heck? And then just stun them. While they're making fun of you looking like a circus person, you can just clobber them. But unfortunately, Superman did not really fit in with a lot of noir tropes, which on the appearance and aesthetic and setting, um, it should be technically. But I guess why to say why why Superman has suffered more of a lobotomization, sanitization than Batman is that I think Batman had a very clear cut characterization. He came later. He was also more under the control of DC as well. Meanwhile, Superman did not. I mean, if you look at the original publication history, there were, it was first with Action Comics, which turned into DC, but then there was a shift and change, and Siegel and Schuster were a bit more independent, a bit renegade, if you will, in the comic industry, while um, Finger and Kane, who created Batman, were more or less trying to fit in within that niche of new Action Comics, or which would become DC Detective Comics. Um, and I think with that too, because Batman has to live underneath all these expectations of noir and edgy. His characterization is pretty consistent. Um, Meanwhile, the problem with Superman was that he was just a little too controversial for an increasingly mild American public to digest. I mean, a furious, you know, vigilante fueled by socialism and social change, as well as hitting a little too close to home with politics and things like that. You know, it didn't sit well for people after the Depression. It's like, oh, we want to be calm. We want to slip into this kind of, you know, mild Americana. This kind of, if you will, this kind of apathy, which you see of post-war America. Of course, Red Scare as well. Everyone having red panic. And I mean, and if you look at original Superman, I mean, honestly, he would have been. They would have, denounced him as a pinko, as a communist. Because of his social tendencies, his socialism tendencies. Not even tendencies. He's driven by socialism. This man's a hard-driven socialist. And of course, that definition is very different than what we think of socialism today, just for the record, because I don't want somebody spouting off political opinions and whatnot. Um, but I guess to make a long story short, the reason why Batman is consistent is because already from the get go, he was pretty much, DC's beloved son. We kind of knew that from the beginning. Also, his concept and characterization are simplistic and very consistent. Not a lot of people want to change a good, strong character like that. And also, the formula works very well. And for the most part, he was more relatable. You have this human orphan. He doesn't have superpowers. He relies on detective work, wits, sometimes gadgets, although, I would say throughout, let's just say from the 60s until now, it's always been a reliance on tech. Um, but, you know, he was more relatable. He had, sympathy for different people who were in crime, sympathy for people who lost loved ones, especially kids who lost their parents. So, Batman being more human, detailed, fleshed out, and consistent. That's why he's been kind of the flagship son for DC all these years. Meanwhile, Superman, unfortunately, being born from not so much, the established comic genre, but more of pulp fiction. Um, Unfortunately, it left a lot of room because his creators decided to keep him very open ended about a lot of things. And they depicted him in such a way, which we'll kind of explore in another podcast, as a way to kind of make it more acceptable. Because if I feel like if they really wanted to write him as they want what he was supposed to represent, an American public would not accept him. So we have an easier time believing an alien came from Krypton, crash landed as a baby in a little rocket thing, and got adopted by farmers in the middle of Kansas. We'll have an easier time to believe that than we would what he was really supposed to represent, and what a lot of people under the surface knew what he represented. Um, but like I said, I think Superman had to be sanitized because he was way too controversial. He was too political. He wanted to really take down and dismantle political corruption, graft, um, just all sorts of the ailments of, a very rotten political system, as well as taking down the mob, which is in the pockets of government and, society alike. And that was just too controversial. And also, original Superman did not like social apathy. He did not. I mean, this was a man, especially when you see him as Clark, he's constantly just kind of indignant about what's going on around him, and he himself kind of feels a little powerless. I mean, yes, he's Superman doing all these things, but it's a bit like it's never going to stop or fully change, but he keeps on doing it because he's so much fueled by this rage for social change. He's just driven. It's a Siphian task, but he's driven to it. um, but for people coming out of World War II and falling into kind of the apathy of the 50s, you don't want that. You want this squeaky clean choir boy, Boy Scout, to teach your young son, I don't know, good lessons about something educational or something moralistic. So he was completely turned from, a socialist working class champion and rebel, if you will, renegade, into this perfect pastiche of morals and squeaky clean values,
Mhm.
for an increasingly apathetic society.
Absolutely put. This is really well described, and I totally agree with you. And you also answered my second question, which was why was Superman allowed to be sanitized while Batman got edgier and edgier? It's because, Batman, as you said, fit the noir aesthetic, right? And also, he was more relatable, while Superman wasn't relatable from the beginning because he was actually an allegory. But then over time, they actually started taking it literally, and for that, that was the part that, transformed him into something more cartoony.
Exactly. When you take away the allegorical nature of what Superman or Clark is supposed to represent, and what a lot of people, especially people who were like second wave immigrants, what they knew he represented, and even people overseas could readily see what he represented. The more you strip that away, the more you try to play it, literal. You take the canon literally. The more he delves into something cartoony, into something very wholesome and kitschy. And
Mhm.
Batman is allowed to be edgy because he's more. He is, as he says, he is the knight. Everything he does is the knight. He is dressed in black. He uses methods that aren't overly gentle or on the up and up at times. So Batman can get edgier and edgier. He's human. We can relate to him. We're able to forgive Batman for something, but heaven forbid Superman does something wrong. Like, I remember when Man of Steel came out, and I saw the backlash. A few, as fans just sort of built up and built up. Everybody lost their everybody lost their heads because he killed General Zod. Well, they're like, oh, Superman would never kill. He was trying to peacefully resolve this with General Zod. And I'm like, not if you knew what he originally did. He was going very soft and merciful on Zod in Man of Steel.
Mhm.
Honestly, he was. I mean, he was just being a real, Saint Deerheart of a boy with General Zod. But everybody collectively lost it. And they're like, he can't ever kill again. He has to only save and help people. And I'm sorry, fans. I know all the I appreciate Superman fans. I appreciate you guys, but honestly, you have to stop idolizing him as a Boy Scout. I mean, let him be a man. Look, if Batman can be a man, let Superman, the OG, be a man as well. Just because he's
Mhm.
got strength doesn't mean he doesn't have flaws, sins, and skeletons in the closet.
Yeah, I think they just want him, like I said, there are a lot of similarities between him and, another beloved character, Goku from Dragon Ball.
Yeah, Silver Age Superman is just basically Goku with a crazy outfit, and I guess less fun because at least Goku wants to goof off and
Exactly. I
eat
think Goku's
snacks.
more appealing, actually.
Yeah, ironically, that's the irony of it. I never thought I'd say this, but Goku's more appealing. I know a lot of people make that comparison, and I remember somebody made a post and they said, "Who would win in a fight, Goku versus Superman?" And someone yelled, "Fool! No, they wouldn't. These two country bumpkins would be sitting in an apple orchard drinking cider, talking about how cool their wives are." It's kind of cute, but so idealized, isn't it?
It is, and I think Goku is actually more interesting because he has to train to get to where he is, but Superman, from what I've seen, like, I might be wrong, so feel free to correct me. Superman in Silver Age barely has to work for his powers, right?
It depends. So, Silver Age, quick recap on Silver Age. Everyone took the canon really literal about farm boy from Kansas. So, he does have to go through a very painful puberty and young adulthood where he's trying to figure out his powers. He's learning how to fly, how to control his flight, how to control his strength. Not because he needs to figure out how strong to get or how much pressure to apply, but actually not to break things, because
Mhm.
his strength is so immense that, I mean, he could easily just like he could go to have a sandwich in a cafe and end up breaking the cafe.
That's
So he has to learn
true.
to handle everything like glass. And there's actually an interesting quote from the animated series of the 90s where um, he's kind of expressing his frustrations with this villain, and they're talking about different things and different powers. And he says that he feels like he's living in a world made out of cardboard. So it does show how frustrating it is for him to have that kind of strength and really not have be able to relax or be himself or have a sense of normalcy, because he imagine if you had to handle the whole world like it was delicate Fabergé glass,
Mhm.
you
That
know.
makes
I
sense.
mean, even if you lean against a door, you might end up breaking it, and shattering,
Right.
you
I
know.
understand that's definitely the downside of it, but then, like I said, there's no need for him to train because he's already that powerful. He just has to train himself to restrain himself. If he's fighting against a baddie, right, who's gonna
Yeah,
take over the world, he's just going to go full speed ahead, and that makes him so OP. I mean, yeah, there
yes.
are downsides to it, but ironically, that just makes him that OP because he never has to train to get stronger. He just has to train to be more normal.
Exactly. So that was just a recap, like and that's what makes him also very boring. He's just OP. Also, some of the powers make no sense. um I know people are going to come into the comments with the Kryptonian anatomy and science that was developed during Silver Age and all the canon, but honestly, freezing things with your breath, shooting lasers out of your eyes, the breath thing is pretty ridiculous. The laser thing, you could use it as a thing of angst. I was originally trying to do that as a thing that, caused a lot of pain and debilitating problems and injuries and a lot of angst that was controlled by emotions. But I mean, if he can just like at will just zap somebody with his eyes, or something, that is just so ridiculously OP. And it's the OP stuff that is just ridiculous. Like even ridiculous things like being able to spin the world so fast that you can turn back time or something,
Mhm.
or lift the entire world. It is so ridiculous. Or being able to go into space without any breathing apparatus. I just never It was just way too OP to be anything relatable. And how can you play the canon so literal like that? I mean, I know alien, kryptonite, Kryptonian, Krypton, the planet Krypton, but it's just so unrelatable. I would much rather see a very toned down what he was originally. I mean, he wasn't even flying in many of the issues of the first half. He didn't really start to fly in Golden Age until the Fleischer cartoons came out. And the only reason they made him fly was because they didn't have enough money to animate all the frames to show him jumping.
Right, you told me that, and, it was a completely different world back then. The intent behind this was completely different from what we see in Silver Age.
It's very much a different world. The intent was very different. I mean, he was supposed to be sort of a very ironically human and relatable character. And for those who could understand what he was meant to represent, um, it was very relatable. Some of the different struggles and ideas and things that he went through, or embodied, or executed, the people who knew what he was really understood that so well. And
Mhm.
sometimes in certain stories and things, sometimes that hit very, very close to home. Like a lot of other audience who would not know what he was meant to be couldn't see that, but people who did thought, right in the heart.
Mhm. Right. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about how Batman's villains, especially, the ones in the Batman 2022, which are more realistic compared to the Golden Age villains.
Yes, absolutely. I cannot wait to delve into that. There are so many similarities. I can't wait to jump right into it.
All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Bye.